Now, managing state and data in Compose is very important, as we've been talking about. So at this point, as we were building our Notes app, we found ourselves in a situation where we are stuck because we want to hoist our state, do state hosting even further, because we want to make sure that any composable, any class can access that data that is intact. Okay, so what we have right now, the situation is that we have the main activity, we have node screen, and we have node row. These are calling each other, right? So node row is being called inside of node screen is being called inside of activity. And so the idea here is that we are stuck because the list node, in this case the state that we created, right, of all nodes, it's stuck inside of main activity, which means even though we are seeing the repercussions of that, we're seeing the difference, we're seeing the state being propagated to nodes and of course to node row, that's very problematic because if you want to add, for instance, another class instead of just main activity, maybe another fragment or another composable that is away from this structure here, we're stuck, right? Because we can't really get a hold of the state of this list that contains data. So in this case here, we would go ahead and pass the node list manually to node screen and node row and to whoever wanted. In this case here, we are making copies of that state, which is not what we want. What we want really is something that is different, something that will allow us to still have this structure. However, we want to separate the state. We want to even hoist the state further out of this whole tree of composables, right? Doing that will allow this separation that we need, because we want to make sure that this state, this data, is not bothered by any life cycles and many things that may happen inside of our composables in main activity. To host this state in a separate entity, we have an entity, we have a class in Compose in Android called ViewModel. So the ViewModel here will encapsulate the state, the data, will do all the work that needs to be done, but most importantly, it will contain that information away from the distractions of lifecycle. So ViewModel in this case will expose values data to other classes and composables as the single source of truth. The data in a ViewModel is intact from the tree that we have there of composables. The data is integral and away from the life cycle of activity and composable, which is really important. So now, whoever wants the data, they can access it through the ViewModel and do what they need to do inside of node row. So if node screen accesses the ViewModel and change the data, node row, when it accesses the ViewModel, because you're going to be accessing the same ViewModel, right? The single source of truth, the one place they can all go to get the actual source of truth. Node row in this case will get the last state of that ViewModel, that variable, or whatever it is that's trying to access from the ViewModel. So separating that gives us a lot of flexibility, as you can see, because now we have hosted the state even higher than what we have done before. Because before we would just try to hoist to the calling function, right? In this case, main activity could be the calling function. That's where we would host the state. But now we're moving that even further down to a ViewModel, especially if this state contains actual data such as list and so forth. Because remember, if the list changes, the data is what drives everything in this application, or in potentially in any application that needs data, right? So having one place where the data is integral, meaning if it changes, then anybody else or any class or any composable that needs that data, when they also use that ViewModel, because that's again is the one place, the single source of truth, it will get the most up-to-date state. In this case, the most up-to-date list. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to use a ViewModel to hoist our data even further up the chain. All right, let's go ahead and implement a ViewModel.